Episode 142, George Stefano. George Stefano is an author, journalist, and critic. In my show, Anti-Fascist Pasta Night, I make reference to MAGAroni, a new moniker for right-wing Italian Americans. I knew I needed to find the inventor of this hysterical slogan. Well, George is the inventor. Please welcome to the show, the creator of the MAGAroni tag, George Stefano. What's up, everybody? So, June 5th, this coming Friday, New York City. That is going to be the last preview of Anti-Fascist Pasta Night before the official premiere in Edinburgh for the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. That is June 5th, this coming Friday, QED Astoria. Tickets and all information at romplicone.com. Cannot wait to see you there. And, of course, Edinburgh Fringe Festival in August. I'm part of the Free Fringe, so no tickets there. You just kind of show up. I'll be there the entire festival. So information for all those shows can be found at my website, romplicone.com. And Left It Wall is out now on YouTube. It's been on YouTube for a while to rent, or I think you could buy it on YouTube too, but now you can just watch it free with ads. So just type in Left It Wall on YouTube. The free with ads option comes up and you can watch it for free. You can also watch it for free on Tubi. It's on a bunch of other platforms too. You can buy it on DVD, but I recommend either Tubi or YouTube free with ads because it's free that way. And you're already paying for 1 million subscriptions. Why not watch the movie for free? Check it out. All right, on to today's episode. George Stefano, how are you? Good to meet you.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So I always like to start at the beginning with these. So tell me where you are from, and more particularly, how has your background shaped your work?
Well, I'm originally from Bridgeport, Connecticut, a working class city, southern Connecticut, about a little over an hour from New York City. To a working class family, Neapolitan origins on my father's side, Sicilian on my mother's, and grew up in a pretty ethnic milieu, with a lot of Italian family culture. We went to an Italian parish in Bridgeport where they were still having masses in Italian. So I was kind of immersed in all that at an early age. I also had an influence on my life, which was my maternal grandfather, who was from Comiso, Sicily. And he actually was a communist, was a member of the party. I remember my father saying he was a really good worker, but he kept getting in trouble on the job because he was always trying to organize the workers.
Oh, man.
And I remember having sort of my first political discussions with him and being exposed to anti-capitalist, anti-war ideas.
So how old would you have been?
I would have been in my early teens.
Okay.
And the Vietnam War was well underway, and he was against it, and I became against it. Whereas my mother had sort of a reflexive anti-war stance. She didn't like war and didn't want her son to be drafted. And although I was some years away from being drafted, my father was sort of, kind of a very typical FDR Democrat, but gotten a bit more conservative and after the war and figured that if the U.S. government said that we needed to be in Vietnam, then we needed to be in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. So those were some of my early formative experiences. So the Italian background influenced me, but I think even more so, just things that I witnessed about this country. I can still remember as a small child seeing the scenes of Southern cops beating up black civil rights demonstrators and turning high-pressure water hoses on them, and then Vietnam, of course, and I came to see how violent this country was, and I really kind of recoiled from this country's violence, its murderousness, and then over the years I sort of developed a more sophisticated and understanding of what the U.S. was about in a number of areas like Italian immigrant history, capitalism, how Italians fit into all that's larger story, and developed a more sophisticated understanding of what this country was all about and ethnicity and particularly race. Race was a big influence on me because I was very young at a time when there was the civil rights movement was underway, but also the assassinations of some of the leaders, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, and so and then black music and black culture became a very big influence on me. And I found in that, besides the fact that I really loved the music, um, like a lot of my rebellious feelings, I felt like were expressed in black culture. I related to a lot to the insurgent aspect and the rebellious aspect of black culture. And whereas, Italians were allowed to assimilate after a period of initial discrimination, and which varied, by the way, from whatever part of the country. Italians were able to become white, whereas race continued to limit the opportunities for black people, race and racism. So I'd say, my youth, my childhood, being exposed to my grandfather's ideas, seeing things that like I mentioned on the news, and then exposure to black culture and reading. And I started in high school to read radical thinkers. My first exposure to Marx was reading the Communist Manifesto in high school, and a lot of other writers, theoreticians, and that helped shape my worldview. Some of whom were Italian, and particularly Gramsci, and looking into my grandfather's experience, I learned that there was a whole history and a whole tradition of Italian American radicalism that I really had been unaware of. I knew about my grandfather, but I didn't realize how much he was part of a larger tradition and a larger force, in the Italian immigrant community.
Do you feel like that? Like the radical history. I mean, I feel like radical history in general has been kind of stifled and kept hush hush in the United States, but it's become so apparently clear how much Italian American radical history has just been, that they kind of just swept it under the rug. Would you agree with that? And why would you say that is?
Yeah, I'd say that's definitely true. In fact, in the 90s, there was a conference sponsored by the Calandria Italian American Institute in New York that was called The Lost World of Italian American Radicalism. And that title, I think, is very apt. And there was a publication that came out as well after that conference proceedings and some longer papers. So, yeah, I think it's been forgotten. It's been suppressed as part of the whole process of assimilation. I think for a lot of Italians who saw that as sort of an embarrassing moment, or either embarrassing or something that belonged to an earlier period of Italian American history. And that was irrelevant now that Italians had become fully American and assimilated into the larger culture, and by and large had far better lives than they would have had if they'd stayed in southern Italy and Sicily. So I think that history of radicalism sort of clashed with this, onward and upward. We're all American now, and especially after World War II, where I think that's often been seen as kind of a watershed in Italian American history. That even before the war, there was support for Mussolini in Italian American communities. And for fascism, but once America joined the war against fascism, that changed, and support for fascism didn't disappear, but it went underground, and so my father fought in the war. He was one of the Italian-American soldiers who actually fought in Italy. And, I remember his stories is how shocked he was of seeing the poverty. Um, and he was in Naples for a while and discovered that the dialect or the Neapolitan that he spoke was kind of old. And, the kids would say to him, "Ah, you talk like my grandparents," or nobody
Oh,
talks like
wow.
that anymore. So that was kind of an eye-opening experience for him.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
the dialects are just so wild in general because it's, I didn't really start learning Italian until college because I sought it out. And of course, they teach you like the Florentine dialect. And so,
Yeah.
every time I'm south of Rome, I might as well just be anywhere. I mean, I've gotten better. I can understand like a tiny bit now, but the first time somebody started speaking Napolitan to me, I was embarrassed because I couldn't understand anything.
Yeah, I'd heard some of it. My parents didn't speak Italian at home. It was the classic story of when the older generation died off. They basically didn't speak it much more. The interesting thing was that my father, in his later years, he died at 97. But in his last couple of years, all this stuff started to come back. And one of my nieces did a little interview with him, and she asked him to say something in Italian, and he replied in perfect Neapolitan. And I
Hmm.
was stunned because I hadn't heard that, oh, I don't know how long. And then she asked him to sing a song if he knew any songs. So he sang a song in Neapolitan, one of the classic Neapolitan canzoni. And so even, after all those years of assimilation and being American, the residual, it was still there in his mind. And interesting that it came out, in the years before his death. But and my mother's family from Comiso, Sicily. Uh, she was a little disconnected from her background. She was an only child, and actually, I didn't find out a lot of that family history until fairly recently, in the last 5 or so years, when I was contacted by a university, and they said that a woman was leaving a bequest to the university, but the university had to confirm that she had no living relatives before they could accept the bequest. But apparently she did have a living relative who was my mother. It was a cousin that she didn't even know she had. So in order to verify this claim, the university sent a genealogist to Sicily.
Oh, wow.
And then I received the report, and I found out all this information about my mother's family that I really only had sort of sketchy versions of, or knew nothing about at all. A cousin that I remember from my early adolescence who visited from Sicily, and his family. So
Did you get to track anybody down?
no, unfortunately, I haven't, but I know where some of them are. And, I hope if I go back, it's been a while since I've been there, that, I might make some of those connections. I remember us getting Christmas cards and photographs from my mother's relatives in Sicily. And I showed them to a friend in Catania, and he was able to, unfortunately, there was very little information, but he was able to tell just from the way that people were dressed and other things in the photo, most likely when that picture was taken, which would have been sometime in the early 1960s. So my mother still had some sort of contact with those relatives, until then. And then after that, her aunt in Sicily passed away, and I think that connection was kind of lost. But I know when I went there for the first time, I felt the connection immediately. It was,
Mm.
I don't think of myself as an especially spiritual person, but I found the experience to be almost sort of that. I felt deeply moved about being there, and I felt very connected. And I had an experience where we went to visit. We were in a building in Palermo, and we saw a woman security guard, and I sort of stopped dead in my tracks because she looked like she could have been my mother's twin. And my partner Rob, as soon as he saw her, and he just said to me, he goes, "Look, Angela," which was my mother's name. So he saw it too immediately. So I did feel that powerful connection, and every time I am there, I feel very much at home. Even though I speak Italian fairly well, and I understand Sicilian to some extent, but I do feel that emotional or even spiritual connection when I'm there.
Yeah, it's an incredible. I mean, the last time I was there, I actually got to, like, one of my Italian cousins got married, so he actually took us to the house because basically, like, in the family there were five brothers. Four of them stayed in Italy. One of them came to the United States, and that eventually led to me after a fair amount of years. And so they took us to the house where they all lived. And they were like, "Yeah, this is where all the brothers lived, and this is where Raphael lived before." Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, spiritual's the word that comes to my mind too. And I'm not really a spiritual person either, but it was incredible. And I feel like one cool thing about, well, there's more than one cool thing, but something amazing about, our digital village now is that, back in the day, there'd be letters and something would inevitably get lost in the mail and then return to sender. And then you try again. And then before you know it, 6 months have gone by. Now my Italian family and I were just all together in a WhatsApp chat. We hear from each other all the time. So it's that is one kind of cool thing about, the global connectivity we have. We've been able to reconnect there more literally. So I've not seen the movie Beyond Wise Guys, but I know that you were part of that. It talks about Italian Americans in film. What is your take on all of that? Are you a Sopranos fan?
Yes.
I am too, but yeah. I want to hear your take.
I wrote an essay about this that's collected in a couple of anthologies, one of which was published by the Italian American Historical Association, which is now the Italian American Studies Association, where I basically, I was looking at the aspect of the gay character and what that represented both narratively in The Sopranos and how it related to Italian American culture in general. But I basically, I've written a few things on The Sopranos. In my book, An Offer We Can't Refuse, The Mafia in the Mind of America, I wrote quite a bit about it. And, I saw it as not just the latest iteration of the mafia genre, but one that really looked at the status of Italian Americans in the 21st century, as suburbanites, as middle class, assimilated Americans who retained some cultural traits, some identification with Italy and Italian culture, but we're fully American and had a lot of the vices of Americans, the acquisitiveness, the greed, racism, homophobia, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I saw the show as like really, besides being very well done and entertaining,
it's just a good show.
As really sharp political, social satire, social critique, class critique, all that stuff. And so when all the anti-discrimination, anti-defamation people started their campaign against the show, saying, "Oh my God, this is cultural genocide," as someone put it, and Camille Paglia and a bunch of these other people started weighing in about how it was even worse than The Godfather. I just thought that was ludicrous. Mm-hmm. I think they just didn't want to deal with what the show was actually saying, and so yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, I've had friends, like non-Italian or Italian American friends, just ask me like, "Well, is that offensive to you?" And I'm like, "No, like first of all, it's just brilliant writing. It's just brilliant storytelling. And no, I mean, it confronts, some of the things that exist and are out there. But my one, my one kind of particular thought on the whole thing is, so I'm an Italian American ginger. Like I really got a niche. And they gave us somebody. They gave us Ralph, the most evil person in the show. They gave us the most evil guy. And then, not trying to spoil anything for anyone who might be just getting around to it, but at the end, Ralph had a wig on. So they took it away from us. Yeah. They gave us a guy. Then they took it away from us. Now, here's the best kicker to all this, George. The actor in real life is an Italian-American ginger. So the actual guy, I forget his name, like Joe something, but he checks the box in real life. But
Joe Pantoliano?
Yes, he's a ginger. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize he was a redhead.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, unless he's always wearing a wig, but yeah, in real life, that dude's like an Italian-American ginger. But they took that away in the show. They gave it and then they took it away. I'm like, come on, you couldn't give us the most evil guy. You couldn't just, that had to be a wig. But, so I have been looking for you informally for a little bit now, because you coined the term MAGAroni, which I really love. So first, I want to ask, just give me the origin of all that.
I guess, I first posted that or used the term on Facebook, and I just, was just playing around, and I realized I kind of liked the sound of it, and then people picked up on it. And apparently it's even made it to Italy. I was approached by an Italian academic who wrote to me and he said, "This MAGAroni thing is genius. I hear you coined this. May I quote you?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, of course." But obviously it's a portmanteau of MAGA and macaroni, and and the ethnic specificity comes from the fact that, there are a lot of Italian Americans in the Trump camp. He won the majority of Italian American votes, every time he ran for president. He has a lot of Italian Americans close to him and in the upper reaches of his administration. His longtime pollster, Tony Fabrizio, and, of course, we know he's appointed people like Dan Bongino, fortunately gone, Pam Bondi, and, quite a few others. So yeah, it's just sort of a spur of the moment thing. I was angry at these people and disgusted with them, and they're all the pro-Columbus crowd and the anti-woke people and all that nonsense. So, it was just having a little bit of fun by coining that term.
Well, I mean, I love it. And yeah, in my new stand-up show, Anti-Fascist Pasta Night, where I kind of confront all of this as part of the show, I mention it. I'm like, we're not a monolithic group of people. Like we even, we call like the right-wing reactionaries MAGAroni. And that line got a laugh a couple times because it is funny. And I'm like, I didn't come up with it though. I gotta find the guy and make sure it's okay that I mention it. So I guess now I'm formally asking you: is it okay that I use it?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
More the merrier.
It's genius. Yeah, no, I love it, and that's awesome that it's made its way to Italy. Well, this is something I always ask everybody in this space because I just love all the different answers. What do you say to the pro-Columbus Day crowd?
That you should really study some history. And first of all, Columbus is by no means a hero. I mean, certainly what he did is very historically significant. And I think of what Ruben Blades, the singer-songwriter, said at the time of the quincentennial, that we won't celebrate, but we will commemorate. And by that he meant the impact that the meeting of two worlds had on history initiated by Columbus's voyages. But I'd tell those people, and I have told them, that you really need to look into the real history of who Columbus was, and that he's just totally inappropriate as a as an icon of Italian American ethnicity. And there are many better figures if people want to look to an individual. And I know there's been a lot of people seem to support a Mother Cabrini Day, the Italian immigrant nun. Others prefer an Italian American history and Italian American culture day, something like that, which I would prefer. But and I just say to them that, you know, the Columbus myth is really false, and it's based on a lot of false assumptions and distorted history, and it's really kind of shocking the way some of these Italian American organizations, the length to which they've gone to keep Columbus. The National Italian American Foundation, for example, NIAF, who trotted out some right-wing intellectual, non-Italian American, I forget her name, to make these absolutely disgusting racist arguments about how backward and primitive the indigenous people of the Caribbean were, and you know, we brought civilization, all these really, you know, imperialist, colonialist, racist myths, and it's really shameful to me that these organizations propagate this hysterical bullshit. Let's, you know, call it for what it is.
Yeah, no, it is a bummer, because it's like, I mean, I was a member of NIAF because I'm like, well, this is ours too. You know, we can't just let one group, but it was just so apparent and over the head that, you know, when they were like, time to renew your membership, I was just, no, it's not. I am not renewing my membership. You know, like I cannot, like, and especially now there are a lot of alternative organizations out there, so it's like, well, I'll join them. You know, like, so what does it mean to you? Like how do you like to spread ideas? I mean, you've done stuff in cinema, you've done stuff in books and articles. And so what does it mean to you to spread ideas? And what are some of the challenges around spreading ideas in the day we live in?
Well, you know, I've been doing this for an awful long time. I started as a cub reporter in the late 70s, and I've always had this desire to express myself and express ideas, and also to learn about things. Journalism for me, in many ways, was about self-education, researching issues and finding out and studying, and so I've always wanted to do that, and have done that for a long time. And I've done it in different formats: print journalism, electronic journalism. But I've always wanted to communicate ideas and points of view and analyses. And it's getting harder to do that, certainly in print journalism. But, you know, I have a lot of issues with the digital era and digital technology, but it has made it a lot easier to get ideas out. And, you know, I chair a Facebook group, or I administer a Facebook group called Leftists of the Italian Diaspora. And, you know, it's only got about, 400 members, but they're in Italy, they're in the United States, they're in other places. So it's kind of a way of sharing ideas and sort of a clearinghouse of information.
It's a great group. I am one of your members.
Yes, that's right, you are. And, I've been doing less journalism and less of that work lately, focusing a bit more on fiction. And I've actually got a couple of novels in development, one of which I'm working with a mentor, and this manuscript is apparently in really great shape, and we're looking about publishing opportunities, etc. But that, even though that's fiction, it's very political fiction. And the protagonist, who's based on me, is a gay Italian American journalist who visits an island that's undergone a socialist transformation, and it's based on a trip I took to Grenada in the early '80s, before Reagan sent in the troops to invade and occupy the island. So that's another way of expressing ideas and communicating them and generally where I'm coming from as a thinker and hopefully a creative artist, because that's kind of where my interest is now. But over the years I've written for a wide variety of publications, the Nation, Gay City News, The Advocate, the Italian American Review, Pop Matters, a whole bunch of publications, focusing mostly on culture, politics, and the politics of culture, and how culture can be political and used politically. So, so even though I'm not doing as much journalism now, I'm still very much focused on that kind of communication.
Are you creatively satisfied? And if so, what does that mean to you?
I'm not. I'm still striving, and I'm pleased that uh, this novel has come along quite well. And I was in a program, an MFA program, last year. That was sort of its origins, and it's been exciting to kind of develop what at the time was a long short story into a novel. So I've definitely got feeling creatively fulfilled through that whole process. Um, but I'm just going to continue doing that as long as I possibly can.
Uh, so where can people go to learn more about you?
Well, I have a website of a lot of my published writing. It's www.georgedestefano.com. It's a site hosted by the Authors Guild. So if people don't remember the URL, they can find me just by Googling Authors Guild.
So before we close out here, I did want to get some of your thoughts on what is going on in the world right now. I actually think that the fascist uprising, and I've heard this from a number of different people. I certainly didn't invent this by any means, but the fascist uprising we're seeing right now in the United States actually has a lot of parallels to what happened in Italy under Mussolini. Would you agree with that? And if so, like unpack some of that in your words.
Yeah, I think there certainly are parallels. Of course, the U.S. isn't Italy, and there are differences, but Italy is the country where fascism was born. It's also where anti-fascism, the original Antifa, was born.
Yep.
And I do see parallels in the sense of a strong man, people gravitating to a strong man, a leader who mobilizes popular discontent, popular resentments, and gains power that way. And the militarization of society, the national security state, surveillance, repression of political protest, nationalist ideologies of the return of open, white supremacy that we're seeing now, and things like the Supreme Court attack on voting rights. So yeah, it's all very, very disturbing. This consolidation and of course, it goes hand in hand with the class issues, the government and corporate entities being, joined together in the state. Who did Trump take with him on his trip to China? All these billionaire businessmen, and the general degradation of discourse, public discourse, political discourse, the open racism, the targeting, huge segments of the population as vermin, as disposable. Yeah, it is frightening, and we don't yet have a movement in this country that's quite that is commensurate with the threat that we're facing. I'm one of the kind of the critics of the No Kings rallies. I think it's great that so many people were mobilized and went into the streets, but Where's the follow through? Where are the actual demands? Where's the disruption? People have these big rallies, they draw huge crowds, but what happens after that? That's the question. Does that all get channeled into the Democratic Party, where social movements go to die? So that's what I've been thinking about that quite a bit.
Well, what do you think is the fix for all this? I know it's a tough question, but
let's say a mass workers' party. I think for starts, I think we do need a genuine opposition party, but as it's very difficult to do that the way the system is so rigged in favor of this Democratic and Republican duopoly. We've seen in California where the Democrats went all out to keep Butch Ware off the primaries.
Yep.
Butch Ware, the candidate of the Green Party, someone whose positions I certainly endorse.
Yep.
So, it's a pretty grim situation. We don't have a real opposition party, and we don't have a genuine or a strong enough anti-war and anti-capitalist movement in this country. I think we need to build organizations and institutions like the right has. The right spent a lot of years in the wilderness building their foundations, their think tanks, their various organizations, and they burrowed in, and they ended up getting, Roe v. Wade overturned. They ended up with a lot of victory. And the Democrats tend to rely on lawsuits and moral suasion and calling the others, calling Republicans fascists and all that stuff. But where's the real opposition? And I think you really see this in the case of Israel. The Democrats, Biden offered ironclad support to Israel in the midst of a genocide. So, where is the genuine opposition? But I think, I don't want to be too negative about that, because things do exist at the grassroots. I think what we saw in Minnesota, how the community rallied there against ICE, was really remarkable. And, it was a combination of advocacy, organizing, resistance, mutual care, really exciting. And of course, we know that one of the martyrs of there was Alex Preti, an Italian American. So, maybe there's some continuity there with older traditions, or at least he kind of represents that. So, it's a very disturbing time. It does seem that Trump is kind of, I wouldn't say maybe collapsing yet, but he's clearly deteriorating. The man is clearly deranged, getting increasingly hysterical and nuttier and wilder, but he still wields enormous power, and his party is still pretty much aligned with him, at least publicly, despite what they say. And of course, he gets everything he wants from Congress. So we have a lot of work to be done to, get out of this terrible period, and to kind of build an alternative.
Where do you find
this is the area of I don't know if it's an interregnum between this and something else, using Gramsci's concept of the interregnum, but it's definitely a period full of what he called morbid symptoms, or many pathologies.
Where do you find your hope, if you have any?
Mike Davis, the late historian and brilliant social critic, Marxist, said shortly before his death that they asked him if he had any hope, and he said he didn't think hope was a political category. So he said, forget about hope. We have to resist. It's like an existential duty, command. You have to exist whether you feel hopeful or not, and I agree with that.
Well, George, thanks so much for doing this.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for having me.
That was George Stefano. Check out all of his stuff. He has done a ton of things. Inventing the MAGAroni tag is just one of many, but what a hysterical, beautiful thing to come up with. Thank you so much for coming up with that, George. Music for the 1000 podcast is provided by Andrew Saxon. Be sure to check out his podcast, the Baywatching Podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star review, would you? Please tell your friends. Make sure you're subscribed, especially if you get this show on YouTube, because they unsubscribe people all the freaking time. So make sure you're subscribed, especially if you're getting this show there. And if you want to support this show on the sustainability end, you can do so over at patreon.com/Ron Falcone. For a Give What You Can level, you get all kinds of cool content. We do a Zoom hangout once a month. We do patrons-only shows on a regular basis. You get insider information to upcoming films and events. And you get the 1,000 episodes before they're released to the public. You get them early. And that's all for a Give What You Can level. Even $1 a month goes a long way. All right. We are 142. That is... I feel like there's something particular about that number, but it's not coming to me. 142. I don't know. I'll think of it. I'll think of it in a couple days. But we are just at the start of another decade, pushing through another decade, getting closer to that another half-century mark. But still got some weeks to get to that point. All right. Catch you next week. Peace.